response that talks about the property tax and goes into a little bit of history back to 2019 of the tax rates, the average taxable value. I think we had an earlier presentation which we shared with you the history of the effective tax rate turning into the no new revenue tax rate, and the voter approved rate at one time was based on an 8% growth level, and now it's at a 3.5% growth level brought to us by the state legislature. I'll stop by just highlighting, I think, the important parts of the tax rate discussion. The recommended tax rate is the 71.25. The no new revenue tax rate is roughly 66.7. The voter approved rate is just under 71 cents at 70.99. And the tax rate that we are allowed to go to without voter approval is 79 cents. So with that, I'll throw it open.
Can you, it's in here, I think, well, maybe the history isn't, but when you say the tax rate we're allowed to go through without voter approval, remind this table and importantly anybody listening what that really means and how that happened.
So with the change of the state law back in 2020, it allows local governments to capture prior year growth prior year growth that was below 3.5%. And in fiscal year 21, the existing tax base only grew by 0.5%. We actually could have, let me do it this way. The no new revenue rate in fiscal year 21 was higher than the existing property tax rate. So what the state was saying is you could have raised the property tax rate in fiscal year 21. And since we did not increase the tax rate in fiscal year 21, we got to carry that amount forward. And any year that we didn't do the whole amount, right, for the no new revenue rate, that you can go back 3 years and capture that.
And if I'm remembering correctly, in the careful deliberation the legislature underwent to get to that place in that bill was just for that reason, right? To allow you incentive as cities to not raise taxes, especially during, at the time, a really difficult economic situation, stabilize, not raise it to the no new revenue rate, but allow you to carry over.
Correct.
Okay. And that was the decision a prior council made, which was very wise, in my opinion, right, to not do that to taxpayers.
And when you look at the tax rates in 21 and 22, we were below the no new revenue rate.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the purpose of this budget response was a very important dialogue around both the proposed tax rate and very importantly, what this council has heard from residents over the tenure so far we've been on council together going into this budget cycle and responding to those in support of the changes or the recommendations that David has made. And while we see, is it around $40 million in additional revenue, David?
I think what we calculated is the difference between the no new revenue rate and the recommended tax rate is roughly $45 million. Every penny on the tax rate is worth about $9.3 million.
Okay. And another thing that this might not be possible right off the bat, but if you think about $45 million in revenue that we're asking taxpayers to support this council and some of our really important initiatives, which we'll get to in a second, the average homeowner in Fort Worth, based on average home price, what does that increase look like on their individual bill? Back of napkin. He's moving around. I can't tell if you can see it or...
We do this. What we shared in the budget response is you look at average taxable value increasing from a little over $216,000 to 243,000. So that value is going up while the tax rate is coming down. And on that average tax, it is going up, what's that, about $150
Per household bill.
per household.
So
Per average taxable value.
right, per average taxable value. Does that make sense to everyone on the table, articulating that out loud? Okay. So the real discussion, and I know all of us care deeply about this and have probably gotten feedback from residents, is why are you raising taxes, right? It's $150 in your bill extra, but it's still real money to families. We recognize that. I think it's probably my husband's grouchiest time when he's having to pay our property tax bill. But and thank you to management and Renee and his team attempting to articulate to our residents here in Fort Worth the 26% of your total bill is City of Fort Worth, and what are you receiving for that investment in the city, number one. And I think we've done a better job this year than ever before, really reminding people of that 50% or more is your school district. And so that's one point. The second would be demonstrating, this is where I think this dialogue needs to come up today, is the $45 million in additional revenue that we're asking taxpayers to believe in our decisions here. What are we doing with that money, right? And it's a significant decision. If we don't use the $45 million and we go to the no new railroad tax rate, what are you going to cut? And I don't think, in my opinion, those cuts are palatable, especially with all of our priorities in one of the fastest growing cities in this country. And remind us, David, you did a great job during budget. What are some of those items that we've put in this budget that are made possible because of this tax rate that you're recommending?
Well, thank you. And I think I got this down after 10 public meetings on the budget. And again, it's a team effort, as you mentioned, with all the management team, but we're emphasizing the safe and clean part for the city, and that starts with public safety, and it starts with the increases that are in the budget for police and fire, and we talked about that money that's in there for fire. Fire's, $18 million more than the prior year, and we've got the 45 additional patrol officers, the additional officers in crisis intervention and HOPE. Now, some of that's being paid out of the CCPD fund, but patrol officers are a general fund expense. And it includes when we shift to being good stewards on our infrastructure that we're building. There's more money to maintain the infrastructure that we're building, and that includes roads and parks and sidewalks, and we're increasing, as you know, the proportion of the tax rate that is going toward the maintenance of that infrastructure. And that increase allows us to do more and better in street lights. Remember, the increase in the pay-as-you-go tax rate is to support street lights and pavement markings. And we're going to go from roughly an 8-year cycle to a 3-year cycle on pavement markings. And we're going to respond to streetlight requests within 30 days. So once they're identified, that we're going to repair and fix streetlights in that period of time. And I'll say that that's been fairly popular going around the city talking about safe and clean community. On the other side, we've talked also about the environmental fee going up, and I'll just put that out there, and I'd say generally that's well received too. We're committing to a visibly cleaner city by increasing the environmental fee. And that again goes back to more street sweepers, more crews picking up trash, more homeless camp cleanups. And so I do think the message of safe, clean Fort Worth resonates pretty well as part of the budget process.
I would agree. And one theme or one thesis I have, and I want y'all to react to this, is I feel like an agreement around this table has been our number one focus in this city right now has to be getting our violent crime down. We now reached over our homicide rate for last year by 2 murders in just the last few days. But the burden of that cannot just be on the police department. All of the things that David just walked through, in my opinion, lead to a safer city. And being a clean city absolutely relates to being a safe city. And quality neighborhoods and safety and lights and sidewalks, all those things. If we around this table decided, nope, we want to be at the no new never tax rate and be able to tell people that, we cannot be a clean and safe city. I can look anybody in the eye and say that with complete faith that I'm right. We just can't. And so it's a tough decision. We would all love to be able to tell people that we're keeping it flat, but it's not possible in a fast-growing city with big city problems in order to make sure that Fort Worth continues to be the best place to raise a family and the best place to have a business and live and have a high quality of life. And I'm also really proud of your team putting together a budget that is tangible, that I think in 1 year's time, we'll be able to honestly say to people, do you feel a difference? And I think the answer will be emphatically yes. I see a difference in cleanliness and homeless camp cleanup and lights and streets, all those things that are really important. And oh, by the way, we've also added 45 officers. So react to that. What are you hearing from people? You've all had meetings in your district around this topic. Leonard.
David, just one clarification on the property tax versus the stormwater and the environmental.
Yeah.
Are on the bill, will those are separate, right?
Yes.
Okay, and is the stormwater or the environmental piece, is that part of the 45 that you're talking about?
No.
Okay.
So, yeah, the 45 just relates
clarify.
to the general fund property tax revenue amount.
Stormwater's separate.
Correct.
Yep. Well, I guess I'll continue. If there was anything that I heard or we hear from constituents is not really any pushback on what we are proposing. It's again the confusion between, or not confusion, it's the frustration with the appraisal district and trying to understand that whole dynamic. I think the way we presented how people are taxed was excellent. It was just very clear, and that led to very good conversations. But again, it's just that dichotomy, really, of you're telling me you're lowering your taxes, but my property's taxes are going up. Explain that. And then the discussion about the appraisal district's role and kind of the black box that is.
Thanks, Leonard. Who else wants to say anything? Elizabeth, go ahead.
I personally support the proposed tax rate. I think we do a really good job of, while there is a net gain in residents' property tax bill, I think that's indicative of what we see across the board of, inflation, and as property values rise, which are great if you're trying to sell a home, right? Everybody loves that TAD value when they're trying to sell their home, but when it comes time to pay taxes, right, no one wants that, and I get it. But I also think what I have heard is that our residents, no one likes to pay taxes. It makes, Dave Parker grumpy. It makes everyone grumpy. But what makes them even more grumpy is when you're driving down the street and you have to replace a tire because you've hit a pothole, or it's not safe driving down the street because, you don't know where the lanes are. It's Mario Kart out there. And I think and what I've heard overwhelmingly from District 9 residents is it's not that they don't want to pay taxes. Sure, everybody grumbles about their tax bill, but people are willing to pay for services.
Right.
And I think this year we have done a much better job at articulating what services they're going to get. And not just with the increase, the roughly $45 million that we have now to work with, but across the board. This is what you're getting. We're going up $1 on your environmental fee, but man, we're putting out a fleet of street sweepers that I don't know if Brandon is in here, but wasn't it like the lane miles was enough to cover the city, was it like a week?
Is there a week or a month every
Yeah.
single time?
I mean, that's significant. And I think when I get those constituent calls, it very much is, a homeless camp needs to be cleaned up? Why is there litter on the side of the road? I've called 3 times and I can't get this street light fixed, or I can't see on the road. And we've really prioritized that in this budget. And so I'm comfortable moving forward with it. I think that we have done a great job of balancing what we need to run the 12th largest city, with being very mindful of the current state of the economy right now.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Carlos.
Feedback we received yesterday at the meeting. We had some, I think, some specialty topics that came up. I mean, I don't know if it's been heard in others, but water, as a resource came up, and that was an interesting question that I had not heard come up in other, meetings unless I missed it. Police presence, and again, I say presence because there is that perception there are not enough police, and to some degree, I understand that and agree. But it's also, I think, on the part of, our residents that they don't have a good handle on how things are deployed, the prioritization of calls. Chief Aldridge did a good job of, addressing some of those concerns. The usual, the roads and sidewalks. I mean, I think I heard it said, William, correct me if I'm wrong, I think our arterials, we're at what, 3 billion in need? Over that number? It's staggering, right? We're addressing it, but again, we can't address it all at once. Taxes did come up, and flooding.
Flooding. Mhm.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Alan, go ahead.
So, I've had several constituents come to me with concerns about the tax rate, and I think the statements I've made are pretty clear on that. When we look at the budget, I think there are a lot of great things here. I mean, aside from property tax impact, everybody wants more police. They want the safer city. They want the cleaner city. Priority-wise, I think we hit a lot of really high notes, and I'm very appreciative of that. So, and I appreciate everyone's point of view today, too.
Yeah. Anybody else? No? No. One thing that, and I know that Councilmember Crane, as chair of our legislative committee, is having, thinking about this right now, but I was just pulling up Senate interim charges, and there are several in there I think we should partner on. If that looks like there is room in this next session to work with the legislature on property tax reform, they're going to look closely at the SB2 that they passed that we are working with right now. And I think we're in a model city, frankly, of how we approach it and work together to still arrive at a budget. And then second is this huge issue around school property taxes. And how can we be of service in working alongside our own school districts and advocating in Austin? Because I still wholeheartedly believe the only way the average Fort Worth resident and homeowner is going to see relief is through some new mechanism for operation of our schools at the state level and funding schools. And the legislature on both sides of the House and Senate have been talking about that openly. So that's just maybe a charge for us to work with Michael and his committee prior to next session and be prepared for that. And then I think you're right, Leonard. I've heard a lot of, it's a mystery around the appraisal district. And some of the news in the last few months hasn't been helpful. And we probably need to take a more active presence in that, and especially around education for folks, because it does seem to be really difficult for people to understand. Yeah. Michael?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that, Mayor. I'm at this point, I want to praise staff. I know this is, most people, it only gets on their radar, a few weeks before this when we start talking about it. But I know that staff and departments have been working on this for a year or more, and taking priorities or other things that we've had in the past and how do we get those things done. What I want to make sure that we do, and this is really, I guess, where the policy side, if we're going to tell people that we're doing this, we got to do it. If we're going to tell people that they're going to have street lights in 30 days, I don't want to hear an excuse that it's 90 days. If we're going to tell people that pavement markings are going to be done 3 years instead of 8 years, et cetera, it better be done. Because we're taking this leap, and I like that how you said, Mayor, that this is tangible. But when it's tangible and it doesn't get accomplished, that's when people lose faith in us.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I'm sitting right now with this property tax rate and look at, but what I'll say is, if we're gonna make a promise, then we better keep it.
Right.
So I'm putting that on the record for staff, because that's when we'll lose faith.
Yeah.
People lose faith in us.
Agreed. Anybody else, questions or anything for staff? No? Okay, that's the last item on our agenda, is that right, David?
That's correct. That, if I could remind everybody, it's still not over yet,
Yeah.
right? We will have a public hearing on the budget next Tuesday, right? So the formal public hearing will be next Tuesday. If you have any other questions related to the budget, we're still available to answer those and provide them to all council members. And then we're scheduled for September 27th, which will be the approval of the budget ordinance and the tax rate.
Correct. And we currently do not have any additional holds for budget work sessions.
No.
But if for any reason there was a last minute or issue, we can always try to find scheduled time to do that. So just make sure district directors know if there was an issue, we can make that happen. So, okay, with that, I think we're adjourned, council. Thank you.